even if we're looking at the financial aspect, we can already see the effects of excluding DEI in their, not only in their recruiting program, but in their entire company culture. Because you have to remember, DEI is not just recruiting.
Right.
You know, it's the way you do business.
Right.
It's the way you value the people that you work with. So it's not just a hiring initiative. Many cases, this is part of a company's mission and a part of a company's vision. You know, it's incorporated in their company policies. So this is not just a talent acquisition issue. So even DEI affects the way a company even does business. And all we have to do is turn on the news. All we have to do is look at the stock market. And we can see what's happening to the companies that have verbalized their decision to walk away from DEI, and we see the consequences they faced.
Yeah. Welcome to Control Your Career, a podcast to help you conquer uncertainty, shatter imposter syndrome, and rise above the expectations imposed by others. My name is Julia Toothaker, and I am the career coach and strategist at Ride the Tide Collective, my career development company, where I offer career coaching courses, and I have a plethora of free content. I have been doing this work for well over a decade, and I want to help empower professionals like you find clarity, navigate your career with intention, and help you advance in your career in alignment with your unique personality, preferences, and values. This podcast is a great place to start your journey toward controlling your career. I'm bringing back the ever-popular Recruiter's Perspective theme for season 11 with a new group of recruiters and talent acquisition professionals to help you understand the hiring process from their lens. We'll be digging into resume and interview tips, talking about how the ATS works, looking at the history of the job market, and we'll be tackling hot button topics in recruiting and hiring. This is going to be a season full of great advice, tips, and uncovering the truth about the hiring process from those who are on the front lines of hiring. Find this episode and more at ridethetidecollective.com and connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post career information and inspiration to help you control your career. Welcome, everyone. We are back with another episode, and this is another special episode in this season, and is so intentional, and I am so excited to have my friend Bridget Baggett here. Bridget and I, oh my gosh, we have known each other 2020?
Yeah, 5 years.
5 years? It's so crazy. So Bridget and I meet weekly to talk about our businesses, and we've been doing that for almost 5 years now, and it's absolutely crazy. And so for this specific topic, I knew that I had to have her on because this is such a sensitive topic. So we are going to be talking about DEI in the workforce. I don't really have a working title for this yet, but the common things are going to be talking about DEI, how the executive orders from January 2025 are impacting the world of work, what businesses have done. Like we're going to talk about a lot of things really under the guise of how this is impacting professionals and what we're seeing from our respective lenses from recruiting as career coaches, doing all the different work that we do. So I want to set the tone for this episode because I know that some of this content, some of this information can get really divisive with people. But one thing that I want everybody to understand who's listening to this is we are here to talk about the facts. We are here to help educate people in some of the nuance of some of this information that I think gets really muddied throughout the different people that talk about it. We're going to talk about the DEI initiatives, affirmative action, and we're also going to talk about the EEOC. And I'm sure some other things will come up within that as well. But we want to make sure that everybody understands what all of those things are, how they're defined, and how they play out within recruiting and in some other areas that Bridget and I have expertise in. As I said, we're going to be providing facts, definitions. We are also going to talk about our personal experience. And I'm just going to say, we're probably going to upset some people on all sides. I feel like we're going to upset some people, and that's okay. What I am hoping for, and I think both of us are hoping for, is that you listen or watch this episode just with an open mind to hear what we have to say, to listen to the perspectives that we have. And I hope that, we can find some empathy and understanding for everything here. That's really what we are going for. Let's see. This is meant to be educational, like I said, and help people understand the impacts to employment and hiring specifically. So yes, there are going to be some other nuances here. We are going to try really hard to not go into all of that. We're trying to stay specifically on employment and hiring. We know that everybody has their own personal experiences. They have their own biases with DEI, with discrimination, with hiring. We know that that exists. But again, we're just asking you to be really open about this conversation so that you can see it from multiple perspectives. And just so everybody's aware, we have notes, okay? We came into this discussion prepared. We have notes. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you might see us like glance over or read off of something. That's really intentional, because what we wanted to do is make sure that we were giving accurate information, that we were sharing information that was really helpful for you. So don't take that as anything other than we are prepared for this conversation. But without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today, Bridget Baggett. She is a career strategist and diversity consultant at Twisted Career. And as I said, we've known each other for many years, and I am so thankful that you agreed to come on and have this conversation with me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I've always been very thrilled about your podcast. I've sat on the sidelines and seen your success. So it's a pleasure to be in the guest seat today.
Yes. This is always one of those things where you have friends and you want to invite them on and have them be a part of it, but you want to save it for the right conversation.
Exactly.
And this was it. This was the conversation. I knew I wanted to have somebody that I trusted, and I trust you implicitly to have this conversation. So again, thank you so much. I would love for you to give us a rundown of your background, because I know you have such a varied history within the world of work, and I think that'll help people understand some of the expertise and opinions that you bring into this as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, definitely. I have been in the talent acquisition space for over 15 years. So not to tell my age, I've been here for a while. I've seen all parts of talent acquisition and recruiting, and I've been in different spaces, from nonprofit, the collegiate space, and actually corporation and for-profits as well. So I've been able to see talent acquisition, diversity and inclusion, as well as recruiting through totally different lenses and different perspectives as well. So yes, I currently now have my own company, Twisted Career, in which I work on helping people build their career development skills, helping them put themselves out there, market themselves, and position themselves for opportunities in the workplace as well. And prior to that, I actually had a staffing and recruiting company for a number of years, almost a decade. Before I actually ventured off into the collegiate space. So I've been working both sides of this.
And that's part of why I wanted you to come on for this topic. Also, we both worked in the collegiate space, and I feel like there's such a nuance even there that I think we'll get into a little bit later. But I just love how diverse your background is within hiring and recruiting, to be able to show so many different perspectives of this topic in particular. So, okay. Well, let's jump right. We're going to jump right in with a hard question. So, being in recruiting, how has DEI played a role in your recruiting journey, and from specifically the recruiter lens?
Yes. Well, it's always played a part because I've been very intentional with my recruitment efforts. Not to say others are not, but I know through my journey, I've always made diversity a part of recruiting. Just selecting the best candidate, but also making sure we're having a wide perspective of candidates that we bring into a pool in which hiring managers are choosing from. So diversity has always played a part in my journey. That being said, depending on what company and what industry you're in, that may look different. As we know, there are certain industries that may not be as diverse. It may be no fault of their own. There just may not be diversified industries. And those are the industries in which I love to try to bring diversity to. And maybe that there may be unknown industries that people may not been able to gravitate to, or may not have the education or background or know how, even knowing that that particular industry is even an option for them.
Right.
So sometimes it's really about a learning experience. So you sometimes have to take off your recruiter hat and put on an educational hat and educate people on the different opportunities that are out there. And I think sometimes the industries that may not be as diverse may be lack of knowledge and sometimes even lack of access.
Right, right. Okay, so based on my research, and again, looking at like pure definitions of things, what you're essentially talking about is affirmative action within your recruiting. So going out into other spaces that you might not normally go to help educate people on that. Am I on with that? Or what are some of the things that you have done to help diversify the candidate pool?
Yeah, diversification is targeting different groups that may be in that industry. So if you're looking into, let's just say, tech, you may want to look at organizations that have created safe places for people in tech to grow their careers. Mm-hmm. That would be kind of starting point. So looking at different type of associations or even different type of programs out there for minorities and diverse groups to be able to have that initiative to get in those type of industries, that's going to be your first line of defense. So educating those that are in those industries, understanding where they want their career trajectory to take them, and then giving them the options of where they can go with their background. And sometimes even going as back as you want to take it back to elementary, middle school, and high school, educating students on what career paths are available. Because I think that can also be a hindrance when someone's kind of, required to pick a major and not really understanding what possibilities of that major may have, and also what possibilities that major may not have. So I think that that's going to be really a requirement to be able to target diversity is primary educating those parties and educating those different diverse groups.
Yes, yes. And I think, okay, you bring up such a good point that I think has been missing in this DEI conversation. So I feel like you and I were both in higher education when DEI really came up. Like it became a thing that people were really focused on and companies were focused on. And it felt at that time, and this is my experience in higher ed watching it unfold, it felt at that time like it was a Band-Aid to a broken system, right? So what you're talking about is getting this information to people much younger so that they understand what they have available in terms of education, whether that's in the trades, whether that is higher education, whatever it looks like. They understand that there are options there. And I feel like the DEI initiatives that came down kind of in the mid 2000s, I want to say, like 2010, 2011, like around that time. It was really about a Band-Aid. It was like, okay, we have to start seeking out these groups, and some of these groups existed and some of them didn't. And so what is kind of your perspective on that, having been in higher education when that came about and kind of watching some of these initiatives happen in real time? Like what was your take on that?
Yeah. I think that the initiatives definitely was able to put a magnifying glass on diversity in different industries, and it was able to pool numbers that most people weren't really aware of. And again, when this initiative was rolled out, many people weren't aware of how many women were in leadership positions, how many people of color were CEOs, or how many people of color even held leadership or VP or C-suite roles. A lot of that information really wasn't known until these DEI initiatives were rolled out. And then they realized that this could be something that they could nurture and try to bring more people to. So going back to kind of the collegiate or even the rudimentary, elementary or high school level is really about educating those parties on the options that are there. And I think that once we were able to kind of put that lens or that magnifying glass on where our shortcomings were, we were able to create programs. So I think a lot of programs also popped up when the initiatives initially rolled out. So you saw a lot of different type of tech programs geared to minorities. You saw a different type of nonprofits popping up, giving out scholarships and giving out different types of grants. So you saw a lot of people making an intentional effort to be able to fill in that gap. So I think that education definitely brought awareness to where we were lacking. And I'm thinking that these programs definitely were able to somewhat bridge that gap, bringing those people closer to industries they never may have thought to see themselves in.
Okay. And I want to point something out because I think this ties into the executive orders from January. So you talked about intention. And back during that time when we started reporting all of these numbers, that sparked everybody. Now everybody had different information. They had knowledge, they were aware, and they were able to go, oh, okay, we do need to put in some more effort to recruit because look at these numbers. Like, are we really diverse? We're saying we are, but is that reflected in the numbers? And so from my perspective, when we talk about DEI programs, which is what, let me consult my notes so I get it right. That's what Executive Order 14151, which is ending radical gender ideology. No, that's not it. Is that the right one? No, I'm sorry. Executive Order 14173, ending illegal race and sex-based discrimination in the federal workforce. So there were those two executive orders. Oh no, I was right. 141. Do you see how confusing this gets? And I have notes on it because of how it's titled, right? So 14151, ending radical gender ideology in federal programs. So that titling doesn't even talk about race, but that is about the DEIA activities, A being accessibility, which is a whole other thing that I don't even know if we have time to go into. But those DEI initiatives are really programs to help people understand this type of thing, right? It's to help them understand the numbers. It's to help them understand their own bias and what they bring to the table from their lived experience, regardless of what that lived experience is. And so it felt like at that time, it was like, oh, now we can have these programs and we can start to educate people. But there was also some pros and cons to that. So I have my own perspective from what I saw, which I will share, but I would love to know from you, when you saw some of these programs come up, what do you think were some of the benefits and what do you think were some of the, I don't want to say drawbacks, but challenges that that people had with these programs as they came up?
When they rolled out new DEI programs, well, I saw. Let's talk about the positives. Definitely was giving exposure to a group of people that may not had a chance to get that exposure. So I think that was the plus. I also think a lot of these programs, even the playing field. Some people didn't have access to different type of opportunities. And I think that, again, these programs were able to bridge that gap. Some of the drawbacks may have been being able to first and foremost follow these programs and really get an accurate number. And I think that one of the things that was very scrutinized was being able to collect that data. Many people were thinking that collecting that data was more so making the programs based on reaching a particular cap or having a particular monetary or even a numerical goal. And I think that collecting that data really was about being able to see how those DEI programs performed and being able to track and make any type of changes if needed. I don't think those numbers more so are not geared towards reading, being able to reach a particular numeric goal, but really tracking to see how the performance of these programs were really taking effect and how they were really, again, bringing in the numbers that they needed to bring in. So I think that was the drawback, that some people may have saw that as giving others a more of a competitive edge versus evening the playing field. And but I also saw the programs, again, giving people access, giving people funds to be able to go to college, giving people access to be able to have opportunities. Because keep in mind, regardless if you give access, the requirements to entry is still the same.
Yes.
We're not moving the goalposts on whether or not they're required to get a job, whether or not those requirements changed based on gender, based on race. The requirements to be able to get that job or get into that program or apply to that school still remain the same. It was really about giving those people access to have to be able to even obtain those particular programs. So I think that those were the pros. Definitely the access, the education, and again the cons were definitely the tracking and the data. I think a lot of people that did not understand the reasons why that data was collected looked at it more so of a more I would call it underhanded way, or a way to, get ahead of someone when it truly wasn't intended for that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this is some of the nuance, right? That in our research and in my research that I was trying to figure out, because I think that was my experience as well. I think that so many people were like, okay, so we have to admit X amount of students, or we need to hire this amount of staff, that look like this or that fit into certain parameters that we've set, whatever that is. And the reality is, when you start putting numbers to things, we're going to hire, X amount of this or X amount of that. That's when it becomes discrimination. And that's when the EEOC becomes a thing. So for those who don't know, the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And so they are the ones that essentially are upholding the civil rights law that's enforcing non-discrimination. And so these are the cases that get taken to the government where there is proof of discrimination within the workplace. Which you and I both know is very hard to prove. There has to be a lot of documentation and a lot of witness statements and all of that in order to even bring an EEOC case to life. But that was some of the nuance that, as I was researching, I realized I think people got hung up on, because when this executive order came out, I heard people talk using language that led me to believe that they were going to start discriminating against people. And I was like, hold on, you can't, just because we're taking the DEI initiatives away does not mean that you can now openly discriminate against people. Like, the EEOC still exists to help combat that. And I think this is where some of that nuance can be really complicated in the moment, and when you're trying to figure out, what does this actually mean? Do I actually have a case for something? Like, all these things become just so nuanced in the grand scheme of it. But I want to be intentional about pointing out that a lot of that data is really collected post hiring. So it's really about, who did you end up hiring It's not, we are trying to hit numbers. So the DEI programs are, hey, we are trying to, be more cognizant of having a more diverse, whether it's a student pool when it comes to college admissions, or whether it's, staff, faculty, all of that. And so where can we advertise? Where can we be so that, women, minorities, people with disabilities have an understanding that they are welcome here. Right.
Definitely.
And I think that's some of the nuance that people don't understand. And you said perfectly is you still have to qualify.
Exactly.
Still have to have the credentials. So just because we have initiatives that are opening up to different places and maybe helping us, advertise in places that we wouldn't have advertised before, those people still have to apply. They still have to meet the qualifications of the position to get hired.
Exactly. And I also want to highlight that keep in mind these initiatives, executive orders that rolled out aren't laws. And I want people to also know the difference between an executive order and a law. And an executive order does not revert or reverse discrimination as a federal offense. So no way, shape, or form with removing DEI would now make discrimination legal. So I also want to make sure people understand that even when these executive orders were signed into place, these were really for on the federal level. To be honest, a lot of the private corporations that did pull out, they pulled out on their own volition. They weren't mandated by the federal government unless they were dealing or had dealings with federal grant or federal funding. That's why you see a lot of, I hate to say, a lot of universities and a lot of colleges that do rely heavily on federal funding are directly impacted by this. But when we were talking about corporations that are private, they may choose, and many have decided to keep their DEI programs. Many of you know a lot of companies that have decided and stand 10 toes down on keeping DEI within their hiring process. So no way, shape, or form I want people to think that this was something that was mandatory and mandated for every U.S. company and every corporation across the U.S. That was not the case.
And I think when we talk about the world of work, that's what was so hard to watch unfold as somebody in the career space is you had this federal mandate come down and it's like, okay, well, it's for, it's for the Fed and it's for companies that are working with them, but nobody else had to do that. And that was hard to watch because that also signals to people that's now not a safe space. Because now you strip out all of those programs, you now have people who are coming into the workforce who are not getting that level of education. Like you and I got that because of the different degrees that we have and the type of work that we do. So I feel like we have a hyper awareness to this that other people might not have. But the average person is not doing that work of, who am I in the world and what biases do I have? Because we all have them. They're not confronted with that. And so then they get into hiring manager roles and now they're going to hire people that look like them, sound like them, that emulate them in some way, that maybe went to the same school that they went to. Like there's so much of this nuance that these programs helped people just break down for themselves so that they understood this is who you are. So you take all of that away and that signals to people, that's now not a safe space for me, so I'm not going to apply. And not only that, I saw a lot of people say, I'm not putting my dollars there either.
Exactly.
And so now you have companies that are like, oh, shoot, we might have to change some things because they saw a hit, to their bottom line. And I will say, so I do, I'm a career expert for resume templates. I think most people know that now, but there was an article that we did around this where there were a lot of companies that that we polled that said that they are actually bringing their DEI programs back. They had pulled them mostly for financial reasons because they were like, okay, we don't have to put money into this thing anymore. That's hard to track, honestly, for a lot of people who aren't doing it right. And they have come back and said, nope, we're putting it back into play because they saw the hit. They saw the hit in hiring. They saw the hit in the bottom line. And so they're starting to quietly bring these back, or they're bringing them back under other names, and they're doing different things. So, I mean, this has been a huge hit to the world of work on so many levels.
And statistics show that business do better with diverse teams and diverse organizations. You're able to look through a more wider lens and be able to cast a wider net when you do have a diverse team. And research has been done on this to have shown that diverse companies definitely do more financially, and people tend to have more work-life balance and more I should say more happiness in their role when they're able to work with diverse people.
Yes, yes. And I want to point out again, nuance. I feel like that's the key word for this episode is nuance and intention. When we're talking about diversity, it's not just racial. And I think that gets muddied sometimes because people hear that word and they think, oh, it's how we look. It's not just racial. It's gender, gender falls into that. It's also ability, right? So people with disabilities and, all of that. Mental health falls into that as well. Religion. Yeah, there's so much that encompasses diversity that I don't want people to leave this and think that it is purely race-based. It is not. It runs the gamut of things that make us different as humans. And I think that we have to really be aware of that. And again, for me, that's what was so hard about one of the executive orders specifically around the DEI programs is I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be good for anybody who is different, quote unquote, in some way. And what different means is not that you are different from the majority, but that you are different from whoever you are sitting in front of for hiring. And so I don't know. This is such a nuanced and difficult topic, but I think we have to make sure that we're pointing some of those things out so that people don't start going like, well, we have this many of this many of that. It's not just that. It's diversity across the board.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I've taken us completely off track of our question list here. Which I totally knew was coming. Okay. So let's go back to the executive orders because I feel like that was something that got publicized a lot and talked about a lot that people are very aware of. So I want to know from your perspective, when those were introduced, did that impact the way that you recruited in any way?
No, not for me. But again, I've worked with companies that have always made diversity and inclusion a priority. So that has never been an issue with the companies that I've recruited for or consulted with or contracted with. But again, and of course, me being a person of diversity and actually making diversity part of my title, because I actually do diversity work. Most of the time companies gravitate towards me because of my background in diversity. So they usually make that a priority. But for others that may, there are others that work for companies where those teams were eliminated. They were laid off. They literally lost their job because they actually went ahead and kind of phased out their DEI programs, which meant, that was their seat. So those may have a totally different perspective on what their company aligns with now. Those that have been in companies where DEI have been shifted in other ways, or as you said, may have been renamed, may find themselves in different positions, working in different capacities in the organization. So they may not as much focus on diversity in their recruiting efforts. But again, that may look different from a different person that works or aligns with those organizations. But for myself, there hasn't been any change in my scope of work.
Do you think that moving forward, nope, that's not how I want to ask that. See, this is this is some of the nuance for this episode, is wanting to word things the right way. How do you think, aside from what we've talked about already, kind of looking into the future, how do you think these executive orders are really going to impact the world of work down the line?
I think that regardless if there is an executive order or not, diversity isn't going anywhere. And I think that the ones that get it and the ones that embrace it are going to be the ones that move ahead. I truly do believe that. I think that when you start to marginalize a group of people, or you start to focus on one thing and kind of have that narrow lens, you tend to block out everything else. And it's very hard to reach a goal by yourself. You're going to need other people from different backgrounds. You're going to need other people from different religions, different different walks of life. They're going to come with a totally different perspective and be able to put your company and your team in a different position. So I truly believe that those that embrace diversity and are open to moving forward with that mindset would definitely be the companies that move ahead. And I don't think I'm saying this out of theory. I'm looking at the fallout now. We all can name some companies, which we're not going to do. We all can name some companies where a company that has embraced diversity and had record numbers, and a company that has phased out diversity and have fallen in the stock market 3 times in a row by Q2 and Q3. Yeah. So even if we're looking at the financial aspect, which, let's be honest, most businesses they're in business to make money. When you look at that aspect, we can already see the effects of excluding DEI not only in their recruiting program, but in their entire company culture. Because you have to remember, DEI is not just recruiting. Right. It's the way you do business. Right. It's the way you value the people that you work with. So it's not just a hiring initiative. Many cases, this is part of a company's mission and a part of a company's vision. It's incorporated in their company policies. So this is not just a talent acquisition issue. So even DEI affects the way a company even does business. And all we have to do is turn on the news. All we have to do is look at the stock market. And we can see what's happening to the companies that have verbalized their decision to walk away from DEI, and we see the consequences they faced.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I feel like that's going to be a soundbite for me for this episode. That was so good. Julia here. Are you feeling stuck in your career, unsure of how to break through to the next level? I'm excited to share a transformative opportunity, the Career Advancement Intensive. It's a focused one-day experience designed specifically for ambitious professionals ready to define their career path. In this immersive session, you'll work one-on-one with me to help you gain fresh insights into your professional strengths and uncover opportunities for growth. Together, you'll clarify your goals, refine your personal brand, and develop a strategic roadmap tailored to your unique aspirations. Imagine leaving the day with renewed confidence, a clear vision of your next steps, and practical actions you can implement immediately. As a bonus, you'll receive additional resources, tools to enhance your resume, optimize your online presence, and deepen your understanding of what drives you professionally. Not all coaching requires a 6-month commitment. The Career Advancement Intensive is perfect for ambitious professionals who want answers and strategies quickly. Before committing, let's make sure that this program is the best option for you in my complimentary career coaching clarity call. The link will be in the show notes and description for this episode. Now, let's get back to the show. I want to switch into the alternative. So one of the things that President Trump talked about was going back to a merit-based system. That was something that he had talked about, was the push for these executive orders. What does that mean? What does a merit-based system mean within hiring? And pros and cons of that.
Yeah, a merit-based hiring approach would be looking at the experience and the qualifications of an individual, excluding any type of characteristics that would be able to uncover that individual's race, religion, sex, or gender. So it's really about making the decision based on their qualifications. Many times they can be based on their tenure, how long they've been with a company, how long they've been in a particular industry, and they're using that and putting weight on that in their credentials in general. And you're lining that up and making a decision based on that. And you may say, what the problem or what are some of the blockers in that type of methodology? It would be, in theory, it sounds great, but you also have to understand how would you actually implement that on a practical level, especially with as much technology that's out there. You're able to look at someone's resume, looking at the college they went to, looking at the professional associations they're a part of, even looking at any type of fraternity or sororities they're in, and be able to identify many things about that particular candidate without even seeing their face. Right. So unless we're going to strip a particular resume to the bare bones, I don't see how that's going to be something that they could practically do on a consistent basis without some of these telltale signs being revealed of who that person actually is.
Yeah. And I think that's some of the nuance here that's so hard. It sounds good on the surface, but there's so much that goes into a resume that you can pick out, and then even just, I know we were talking about this a while back, even just the college, the discrimination around college, which college you went to, or even the degree that you have is obscene.
Yeah.
It's so bad. And I had a friend just a couple days ago, we were talking about this episode and I was preparing for it. And he was saying that somebody in his office went to an Ivy League and was asking everybody where they went. Well, he went to a state school. And he said that, and this other person made a face and did not want to, talk about it anymore. Like, it changed that person's view of my friend because he went to a state school, even though secretly he's one of the best in the office at his job. We're not going to talk about that though, right?
Exactly.
He didn't go to the right college. And he's getting that level of discrimination. So, yeah, I mean, a merit-based system, I think, sounds great in theory. And there are some benefits to it, but there's also some ridiculous downsides in terms of the implementation that we go through.
Yeah. And like I said, with technology, LinkedIn, social media, it's very easy to run a name and find out who someone is.
Yes.
And like I said, unless we're going to hide or remove that information, even the name of the person, again, how practical is that going to be to do that on a very large scale?
Right. I think about, too, what we already deal with in an internal structure, right? So we're in a company and we want to get promoted or we want to apply to another position or whatever the case may be. How often is that decision merit-based? Truly. In
Yeah.
so many scenarios, it's either who has been there the longest, right?
Mm-hmm.
That gets pulled up, or you have a relationship with somebody. Like you have
Mm-hmm.
made yourself known. You have the right connections within the company. You're really good at networking through everything, whether you are the best candidate or not. A lot of times it's those relationships that you've made or the longevity in the
Yeah.
company.
It's funny that you say that. I actually did a whole workshop on something I call as the likability factor,
Yeah.
and how that plays a big role in your career and where you end up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny that research shows, and I think we all probably know, it's not the most qualified that gets the job. It's the person. It's the person that the people like.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that. I think we've all at some times in our life has seen even outside the workforce. You can even think back in high school where you had cliques, in college. People gravitate to the popular people. And that was no different in the hiring, as well as that. Internally, people play favorites sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and then people also choose people based on who they like and who they work with. And it may not have nothing to do with their ability to do the job. They may do it well enough, but they may not be the best. So I actually did a workshop on that, and I think that's fascinating about how the likability factor, especially as you get older, but definitely play a bigger part than your background, believe it or not.
Yes. And again, this is the nuance too. And this is what some of these DEI programs are trying to do that have now been stripped away, is trying to help you as a hiring manager understand the bias that you're bringing to the table, even around that. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
are you hiring this person? Is it because you went to lunch a few times? Is it because you both like golf together on
Mm-hmm.
Sundays? Why
Yeah.
are you hiring that person? What is the motivation around that? And are they the best person for
Yeah.
the job? And so those programs help you break that down for yourself around, what is my bias? What do I bring to the table that I need to take a step back and go, oh, I'm definitely being really biased. Maybe that person's not the best person for the job.
Mm-hmm. And exactly, and that's what I was going to touch on as well, is that a lot of the programs may directly deal with just the human interaction,
Mhm.
because what you described is just natural human behavior. We're going to
Yeah.
gravitate towards people that have the same hobbies as us, that look like us, that experience life through our lens, and that's just something that, according to human psychology, is just natural. But we also have to be more intentional when we make decisions, when it's based on business and when it's based on hiring. And those programs that you're talking about are able for people to kind of take a step back and be able to look at it through a different lens and a different perspective and understand when they're being biased. Because some
Mhm.
people may not know when they're being biased because it's such a natural thing. Hey, I like this person. Why not hire them? I get along with this person. Versus, okay, in addition to you liking them, do they actually qualify for the position?
Right. Right. Okay, let's dig into this a little bit more, because I think, especially in the workplace, I know this is something that I have heard from people over the years. I've watched it unfold in spaces. But what DEI initiatives, and this is really more on, I think, the training side, right? So initiatives within an organization, what have you seen work really well and has been effective for people?
What I've seen work really well in this space is, again, I think identifying biases for one, and not strictly dealing with race. It can be dealing with colleges. It can be dealing with family, because a lot of people do hire their family. So just thinking about looking at it through, being able for people to get out their own way and look at it through a different perspective. I think that's the biggest impact DI programs have had. I also think it has helped people to unlearn various stereotypes as well. Because a lot of times we bring that to the table unintentionally. So again, some of these things may not even be intentional. It may just be your environment. A lot of times you may not be around a certain group to understand that that may be something that you've learned versus something that actually is true or actually is real. So I think that DI helps people to determine whether or not they're inflicting their own stereotypes or their own biases on a situation without being able to look at the bigger picture holistically. So I think those programs were able to align people and educate them on the do's and don'ts, but also even outside of the professional workplace, just looking at their own personal relationships they have, their personal circles that they have, and understanding whether or not they're diverse or not and why, because you tend to work around the people that are around you. So I think that also lets them kind of take themselves out and look at themselves on a personal level as well, when they're only making their decisions outside the workplace.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And okay, the next question has to be the obvious one, which is where have you seen them miss the mark and just cause confusion or anger? Because I feel like that's what we end up hearing about the most, which is unfortunate. But what have you seen there?
Anger around taking away the programs, or?
No, I would say, okay. So I've been in spaces where DEI programs have been implemented and the focus has been on race. And it's in a predominantly white workplace, and the conversation really stems from understanding your whiteness, understanding the privilege that you have, but not in a way that is helpful, if I had to be honest. I've watched it get implemented in a way that is really divisive and honestly creates more division than it does help people understand themselves. So like the way that you described how it's worked well, I wish that was the main way that these programs have been implemented. But from my experience and then just different people that have talked to me over the years, more often than not, I see it becoming this place of divisiveness, not intentionally, I don't think, but I think it's how the information has been communicated, because I think that there is a message that sometimes the people who are implementing these trainings are trying to get across without laying a foundation of trust and understanding of what it actually is.
Okay. That being said, I think that where people may get upset or angry is probably the lack of understanding the intent of the programs that are put in place. They may be very poorly educated on why the program's there. Some people may see it as some type of competitive maneuver or some type of way they're putting something in that becomes a barrier for them.
Right.
So I think a lot of anger stems from thinking that now you have created competition where it did not exist. Right. Whether that's going in for the same role, competing for someone for a promotion, applying to a school. We've heard a lot of things out there on social media where people feel that other people get better chances, or because of this initiative, people have a more better chance than others. And not understanding, and it goes back to what I said at the beginning, how this is really about evening the playing field for everyone. But when you have a person that has been poorly educated on it or only gets their news from social media, they may not understand the why behind it. And they see it more so as a barrier for them than for something that's really going to help them in many ways and help the organization as a whole. You may have some that don't want to do it by their own individual reasons that have nothing to do with it. They may understand the reason why, but they still may not want it. But you may have some, and I think it may make a majority that may not understand the why. Because when I hear about, especially when I hear comments about, well, that was a DI hire, or that person got that job because of this, or, oh, they got admitted because of that. Not understanding that they still had to meet the same requirements as everyone else. Right. That wasn't the thing that got them there. So unless you really understand how the behind the scenes workings actually work, you would, on face value, it would be understandable why you would think that. But unless you understand that the reason why this person would even have access to apply to this is because of this program, then you'll understand that that's why that program's in place.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, people that get offended by these programs, I think that's the trigger point, right? Is like, if something like this is offending you, that's the point for you to take a step back and go, okay, this hit home. Why did it hit home? Now I've watched, the delivery of this not be great. So there is that side of it, but also you as a person, you have to take a step back and go, okay, this is bringing up feelings, and what is that? And why am I angry, or why am I upset? Like, what is going on there? And I think, to your point, at the true heart of this is what we're trying to get at, is for you to confront some of that and go, why do I feel this way? And I also feel like so many workspaces just do not have the level of trust that is needed for employees to feel comfortable enough to get to that level in a group scenario, which is usually where these things happen. But if you were to talk to somebody one-on-one and actually, understand who they are and pull their story out and all of that, I think you would get it and you would understand and they would understand. But I think that's some of the downfall I see too of these programs. It's just the level of trust within the organization.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like we've gone over a lot. And I know that there is so much more that we can touch on. But just for the sake of time, I want to kind of ask a couple of wrap-up questions to help us here. I will say, okay, I have to say this because I feel like this could be a whole other episode. In doing all this research, I actually felt like a lot of this was socioeconomic. And I don't know how you feel about that, but that was one of the things that popped out to me so much, was how much it across the board is socioeconomic, and it becomes about race for a variety of reasons. But I actually feel like money plays more of a role in this than anything else, and nobody wants to actually talk about that. I don't know if you feel that way. I don't want to minimize the racial piece of it, because I know that there is a lot of issues and a lot of systemic things there. But just, I think in 2025, having this conversation, so much of it comes back to socioeconomic. I don't know if you agree with that or have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, you can't talk about adversity in pretty much segmenting a group of people without talking about social economics. It almost works hand in hand. You have a group of people have that been disfranchised, and more times than not, it's because of the lack of access. And usually the lack of access does come down to money. It does come down to, do they have the resources? To get the job you want, you got to have the resources, go to the school. In order to go to the school, you have to have the resources to be able to apply. So I've seen people not apply to a particular school because they didn't have the resources to do so. Because those application fees add up. We haven't even got to financial aid.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, having that and having that uneven playing field, it definitely has to do with the social economics and where people are in class, so to speak. You have people that have access where this doesn't affect them at all. They could care less about DEI either way. There's an air of indifference because it does not affect them. And that may not even matter what race they are,
Yes.
because social economics, some cases where you are in your status, depending on who you were born to and what family you came from, may not have a color, so this may not affect them. But then when you look at those that are impacted by different type of barriers that have in place, it definitely has been segmented in a certain group of people and a certain group of people with a certain type of income. So I think that, it definitely does go hand in hand, and it correlates with social economics as well as status and class.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Last couple questions, I promise. Okay. So, how can companies or institutions build truly inclusive environments without relying on identity-based preferences?
Without relying on identity-based preferences?
Yeah.
I think it starts with your company culture, creating an environment where everyone feels inclusive, everyone feels like they belong. And this can even be incorporating, as I talked about, in your mission and vision, in your values of your company. That doesn't have to be labeled with a particular race or background or social economic level. So doing something as simple as having an open and welcome environment for all people to work, that's a way that you can, that's a way that you can actually uplift DEI without having to call it even DEI. So you, without taking away, with taking away those labels, creating spaces where people do want to be able to be themselves, are able to be open, are able to communicate without backlash, having a path of career trajectory or upward mobility, and basing that on their experience, their professional background, and also, of course, their work and qualifications, regardless of race or regardless of background, is going to be something that's going to be crucial. So there's different elements companies can do without really putting together a formal program. I know some groups put together ER groups and implement that in their particular culture as well. So people can get together that may live in a certain demographic. If it's a global company, that may come together with certain hobbies, so being able to create environments where people feel welcome and able to kind of have that sense of community, which is really going to be able to make a stronger workforce.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. Hobbies. I feel like hobbies is such an underrated group that you could have within an organization. That would help so much. Companies do that. You should do that. We need that more.
They'll have outings. They'll have days where they'll take days off or volunteer work. They have volunteer days where they'll get teams together and people that really like to volunteer and give back to the community. There's a group for that. So it's just ways to come together that doesn't have to have let's you say, a very strict label on it.
Right. Right. Okay. And then for job seekers, what do you think that job seekers should consider when it comes to culture or DEI initiatives within organizations, especially now given the climate of what's going on?
Yeah, do your research. I would do your research, look at companies, look at their current policies they have in place. A lot of this stuff can be made public on their websites. And you can also just look at who currently working there and the current positions that they have. I also say look at their company culture, look at their mission and vision. What do they represent? What does their brand say about them? So you can make a decision based on, is this a company that I feel like I would fit in? Is this a company that's doing the type of work that I would be fulfilled in? So I think it's really about also not only looking at the company culture, but also looking at, would this be a fit for you? Because not only you're looking to meet the needs of the company, you want to make sure you're choosing a company that's going to meet the needs for you as well. Yeah. So I think that doing your research is going to be big, whether that's going online, looking at reviews, looking at what their mission and vision is, what type of community work they've done or contributions they've done, what type of missions they supported. So I definitely will look at that. What are things that they kind of stood their ground on? That would tell you a lot about the perspective and the values of that particular company.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Such good advice. Bridget, thank you so much. I think this was so helpful, and I hope that the people who listen, the audience, they took away from it what they needed to take. I think this was such a good opportunity to really shed some light on things, clarify some things, and just give some different perspectives and multiple perspectives so that I hope people can be a little bit more open-minded around this. And honestly, do your own research.
Yes.
Do your own research. A lot of the documents that I used were from official government documents and websites to make sure that we were getting the right information and all of that. But definitely do your research. Do not trust the media. Do not trust people on social media. I hate that I have to say that, but regardless of what your belief system is, you have to do the research and get diverse perspectives on this topic to make sure that you understand where you fit in with it and what you believe. But Bridget, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Y'all, I had so much fun interviewing Bridget that I completely forgot to have her talk about how to connect with her and her company. So I'm going to share a little bit about that so that you know where you can get connected and just share a little bit more about what she has to offer, because I'm going to tell you it's very exciting. So if you are ready to turn your career twists into strategic triumphs, connect with Bridget on LinkedIn at Bridget Baggett and head over to twistedcareer.com for more resources and insights. And I will have links for that in the blog post for this episode as well. And here is something really big. And personally, I'm excited because Bridget and I have been talking about this for so long. But she is introducing the Twisted Career Academy, and it's going to be opening soon. It's going to be a membership starting at just $9 a month, and it's your gateway to structured growth, community, and professional development designed for career navigators like you. The soft launch kicks off in October 2025, but you can join the waitlist now to be the first in line. And I highly recommend this group if you want to have more of that career support with a group of people. Until next time, keep it strategic, stay curious, and never be afraid to rewrite your own career narrative.